Hello, Joseph.
Hi, Justas.
I'm so glad to be back in conversation with you, seeing you live in Vilnius, walking around parks, around town, sharing how we feel about life and about the practice that we are in. And once again, we want to put something on camera, something on recording, so that all the precious little insights, they don't evaporate into the air as if nothing has happened. While I feel a lot is happening every time we meet, every time you share your knowledge, every time you lead us into practice. So let me start with a question. I've noticed you've been in podcasts lately, and you've been questioned by many people about where you're coming from and how this practice that you are offering to the world has formed and maybe where it's going. But I would somehow like to start lighter this conversation and ask you, where do you want this conversation to go? What do you want to talk about today?
It's a good reverse. I hope we're going to have an open dialogue and that we're going to come up with questions that might be interesting for both of us. So we don't have to have a particular directionality. We just can start and things will evolve. So that's basically the best conversation. We don't have to have a set goal, what we would like to achieve.
Yeah. Something I appreciate about the practice that you offer to the world, and we follow that as well very much when we work with people, is to always offer a surprise, always offer something unexpected and new, an artistic approach to human development. What would you say to that? How important is it to always face the new, to make this podcast unexpectedly new, to dive into topics that we have not dived in yet and have not rehearsed? What would that be for you?
Yeah, I guess if we always attend to the world in the same way, if we can predict super well what's going to come next, maybe it will become boring. So I guess a degree of surprise is always necessary. So if the life does not offer the surprise, then probably we need to do something that will surprise us, right? So we create a situation in which we can be triggered and maybe seek for new information and be inspired again to search. So we are not kind of locked in a local minima, or local optima. We found something that works quite well and we stay there because we are happy, or maybe we are not daring to explore more. So if usually the life is quite dynamic, and so we need to adapt. But if it becomes overly stable, then I am searching how to destabilize it, because that seems to be more inspiring for me.
Well, this is exactly what I'm noticing people say in big conferences from stages. Yeah, no, life is unexpectedly changing, and we need to be adaptive and all of that. But when I look at this ordinary life of people, it seems that it becomes quite routine-like. It becomes quite predictable and stable, and that's how I think somehow practice comes in as that destabilizer, which allows people to actually discover the potential of this being in unknown, the potential for growth of being in unknown. But the paradox is that although we somehow say that life is unpredictable in itself, we still need to search for those situations to artistically create them, that we really experience that. What is that? Where have we arrived? On the one hand, we say that life is unpredictable and changing, but our lives, they at the same time become somewhat routine-like and boring on some level. And then we need practices which really take us out of our comfort.
I think life is happening somewhere in a phase transition, so somewhere in between order and chaos. If we maintain ourselves there, like stable but a little bit unstable, then a lot of interesting things can happen. So, of course, you look for a certain control and stability in your life. But if it becomes overly stable, then we can be running into a trouble over a long period of time. So I am very much interested in when things, they get too chaotic, I'm looking for order. That's normal. So I have a certain degree of control over my life, which is very, very important. I'm looking for causal relations. But If it becomes overly stable, then I'm very purposefully looking for a little bit of instability, and that is happening. I don't wait life to give me a slap, because then maybe I will be not prepared to respond. So I'm surrounding myself with people that are creative and they can create a bit of chaos in my life, or I am searching for new encounters, so I am seeking for new information. I'm hungry to learn something new. I am also like to engage with in a processes that do not lead to anything in particular. We've been talking about that yesterday. So I do not always do something for a purpose of learning something in particular or achieving a certain goals. I just enjoy playing. Most of my life, I have been playing, and I would like to maintain that kind of status of having that privilege that, yes, I have a certain obligations, but most of the time of my life I play. And that just brought so much of a beautiful, unexpected information and encounters in my life. I know my parents been really worried about me when I was young, but my father said, I did not worry too much because I saw you playing. I saw you playing with a shoelace for 2 hours and you were not getting bored. So I said, you will be doing fine.
Do you think we are losing this playfulness in our modern ways of life?
I don't know. I see them even in my kids that, the environment in which they are, the world that they occupy is so well organized, so well structured that they do not have as much opportunities to be playful and engage in a non-structured play. So it might be a little bit more difficult for them in the world that I am in. So then my role or Linda's role is to see how we could allow them to, or how we could create spaces in which they can express themselves creatively, not always seeking some kind of utilitarian kind of result, but they can just enjoy being and not worrying about having. We talked about it yesterday. We want so much to have that we forget to be, just to kind of exist and enjoy the moment, not knowing where we'll be led. I don't know if everyone is losing it. Maybe there is this kind of tendency to overly control. Well, definitely in the usual life. But I am meeting a lot of artists, so they like to be challenged and they like to seek the world, looking for information without having a particular goal, a particular direction. So they just like throw a thought into a space, and then they see what comes in return and get inspired by it, and then they take the momentum of it and grasp it and create maybe something out of it, create a world out of nothing. Maybe you start your art creation just by being inspired by a color. There is a color that you're inspired by, or there is a title. You don't know what the show will be about. You don't know what your creative process is going to be about, but maybe you're inspired by that stone or by that word or by that poem, and then you just open yourself up to it and see what comes. And that's a very beautiful process. And by teaching a lot, I realized that not many people had an opportunity to be part of creative process. So it's difficult to understand like how I can be participating in that creativity, how I can create a world that suits me. When I teach, I would like that my students, they have this agency to be capable of working with the scripts that were given to them. So one of the scripts is evolutionary script. So you are the near to optimal model of the world, like your body is the near optimal model of your informational coupling over long evolutionary time. So we start by something, we have a certain bodies. This is a script that we need to respect. We need to respect our physiology. We need to maintain ourselves in our homeostasis. That's good. Then during the developmental period, our caregivers, maybe our parents or someone else, they introduce us to the world. So we encounter the world that was introduced to us, and hopefully we are coping with that world in a creative and inspiring way. But then later on, we gain our own agency. We select what we would like to be participating in within a certain existing world. So the world has a certain rules and propose a certain game, certain culturally structured forms. But then we can go even step forward and say, okay, the world has proposed something. There is a basketball game, there is a football, there is there's a certain societal rules, and can I bend those rules? Can I be innovative? Or can I potentially create completely new world? Can you create a new world? There are many innovators that created something that never been seen before. And I am very much interested in that continuum that you are able to work. Okay, I respect my own physiology. This is given, this is evolution, beautiful. How I can work within those constraints. Then there is a certain social forces that they act on as history. Politics, religion, culture, technology, they influence the way we are thinking. Okay, can we work within those boundaries? Those boundaries are expandable, or they shrink, or they can be twisted. We can find a new innovation. And then further on, can I add my flavor to the world? Can I create a world that never existed before? Maybe a new book, you write your poetry, or you maybe create a new product, maybe a new glass, or maybe a new beautiful table or chair on which you cannot sit. So that would be beautiful if most of us would have that opportunity, at least thinking about that possibility.
When I hear you speak like that, I feel in myself this subtle feeling of joy arising out of the possibility to be human in a creative, playful, discovery type of interaction with the world, which somewhat is valuable in itself. This somehow defines life, doesn't it? Whereas I notice that I myself and many people that I encounter fall into the trap of being very pragmatic, and even when addressing their own lives, asking for, okay, so what do I get out of it? How fast? How effective? How optimized do I become in doing one or another action? Whereas it seems to me that this playfulness, openness, and creativity requires a totally different value system, which sort of values things that we valued as kids almost. You know, just being in the process of revealing what that shoelace is.
Yeah. So, we have always pragmatic and epistemic actions. They complement each other. So you are in a dark room and you are searching for your keys. So probably first you're going to go away from your target where the keys are, because you go and you're going to switch on the light. So this is epistemic action. So you go away from the target that you try to achieve. And then only when you reduce the uncertainty, then you know that, oh, the key is actually on the table while there is a light, so you see it, and then you pick it up. So in our life, we employ both of them simultaneously. Now the question would be, how often are we willing to leave the world that we know? What we've been also discussing yesterday over the dinner was there is this like a local optima where we feel good about ourselves. So we find some good solutions to our life. But how often we ask a question, is there a better solution from good? Of course, there comes in the question of how expensive would that better solution be. Maybe we are good enough, is just good enough. This evolutionary speaking, that's maybe a good thing, you know, because if it's better, maybe it's better, maybe it's more precise, but maybe it's too expensive. So we need to employ the creativity and stability or pragmatic action and epistemic action in a very context-sensitive way. So we cannot say, oh, creativity is better than being a stubborn. Sometimes stubbornness is really, really good. Sometimes not responding to an environment is really amazing. So it's not only, oh, environment changes and I need to respond. Sometimes environment changes and I do not respond. So that's why always context-sensitive, never really coming to this is the best way of doing things in the world. It is only this constantly readjusting model, our hypothesis of the world, and always slowly, and not slowly, but continuously readjusting our action. So there is this constant little flux that we create. Sometimes we are more stable, and then we are a little bit more flexible, and sometimes we become a little bit rigid. And the beauty of you navigating yourself through those different qualities, that's what I would be looking for. What we usually do, always there's someone smart and tells you, okay, if you lift the weight that and that much, then you will decrease the chance of cardiovascular diseases that much. This is one of the ideas, but having some kind of strong ideas how you should be eating, how you should be exercising, and saying this is better than that, that removes life from it. Everyone needs to a little bit figure it out. What I'm more interested in, can we be educating or can we be sharing information in such a way that we give freedom to people to create a response? So, okay, we can be doing this kind of parroting, teaching. So I teach you something that is stable. I teach you a story, maybe story about, I don't know, I don't want to mention any systems, but let's say I tell you these are the exercises.
Moving like an animal, for example.
In a particular way, or stretching in a particular way. And this is this magical sequence that will deliver this and that. Yes, that's like learning a story and then repeating that story. Someone wrote something and then you're mechanically repeating. And you can become really good at repeating it. That's okay.
Certified.
Yeah. But what if we understand how the language is being created and how we can use words, how we can create novel words, how we can understand the syntax and grammar. So it means how we put the words together in order to create sentences, and how from those sentences we can create stories, and how we can tell stories in a context-sensitive way. So if we're talking about the movement practice, if we talk about our health, our physiology. So today I'm in a certain physiological state, right? So my practice will and should reflect probably that particular physiological states. If tomorrow I need to downregulate my sympathetic nervous system, or I need to upregulate certain functions, then probably the practice should change. Do you always need to go a certain authority, a certain system, and certain master to tell you what to do, how to respond to life? You have direct access to life. There should be no one in between you and the life. Every encounter with life is giving you a feedback signal from which you can learn. So you have a direct access, you have direct feedback from the world that the world of significance that you have created. And so would be more interesting if people can create their own particular stories of respond in the dialogue. We're creating a dialogue. If I come here with certain idea that I want to hold on to, then I will be not listening to you. Or we could potentially also create a script. Let's say we improvise and we write script out of it and then we film it for the purpose of having it fixed on the movie. So that's also valuable. But we can also say, we're going to sit opposite of each other and we're going to be listening to each other and we're going to respond the best we can at that particular moment with whatever, in whatever context we are, however we feel. So I don't insist I should be funny. I don't insist I should be a special Jozef. I am only who I am in this particular moment. And if this moment I'm slower, or in this moment I'm a little bit more serious, then I should follow what's currently happening, and hopefully through the dialogue these things will evolve. And that is evolvement, that capacity to respond and be alive, this dialogue is something that interests me so much, rather than everyone constantly telling you what to do.
So if you think about why is it that we aim for those three best exercises, three advanced ideas on how to do this or that, all the how-tos of the world, is because we want to be perfect. It's because we want to not fail. It's because we want to do as best as possibly can. So unless we actually shift for life rather than perfect, or alive rather than perfect, and admit that, life isn't about being perfect. Life is about finding those inconsistencies and things that also don't work, things that are absolutely coincidences and chances, which is actually what creates this fabric of life. And we also spoke about this yesterday. You said, I'm here in Vilnius now, and how did I get here?
Yeah.
I said, you booked a flight and you came. Yeah. But on the larger scale, how many coincidences had to happen in your life, including meeting your partner and wife, Linda, so that it evolved into such a fabric which is now here. So it's just being this receptive to whatever is live, whatever is happening. And I think underneath that receptivity to life is also the practice that we choose. Mm-hmm. So let me think of somebody who is choosing the latest, best protocol for whatever. Mm-hmm. It means that we are actually projecting life forward. It means that we are somehow creating the end result, which means that on the way we might not be so attendant to what is really there now. And that way we probably miss an opportunity of discovery, creativity, and fun within the process.
Well, look, if you look at the evolution, then you see that most of the model were updated and discarded over the longer period of evolutionary time. So 99% of the models, I guess, are now gone. So we should not become overly loyal to our past, or because we are dealing with really unreliable structures. So they need a constant attendance and constant adaptation. So I feel any living organism is some kind of a wanderer, someone who wanders through the changing landscape and adjusts to the change of the landscape. And because the landscape, the context changes, then also the goals are changing a little bit. And so I guess it's a constant adaptation of the roads because they change. What do I mean by changing landscape? I don't mean someone builds a house or the city changes, but the landscape changes, the relations in that landscape changes. You are changing as well. So there's this interoceptive internal landscape, physiological landscape that influence the way you're thinking, the way you're perceiving, the way you're hypothesizing about the world. But also because you are changing, the world changes as well, right? Your perception changes. To what you attend will change because, the salient map is constantly changing depending on what you are dealing with. And so I believe there's this constant rolling perception action cycle within which you have an opportunity to always update and a little bit change and a little bit adapt. Now, I guess people are interested in fast, and people are interested in some kind of answers because they are usually people that are sick or close to dying, they are rushing because it seems like there is not much of time.
There's no time.
And I have the feeling that they are hammering their bodies and rushing through the landscape by the kind of designed path that someone else walked before. But what if we can wander together? But I understand if you do not have time, there is no time for wandering. There is no time for looking for this fitness peak, so to say, the pathway, how you would be responding to your very unique life, to your very unique world. Because people listen to those protocols and those suggestions and they fall for them. So it means there are ears. People want to have some kind of easy solution. It works. People fall for this diet and then they fall for that exercise and then fall for this. But how it would be if we allow people to think for themselves, finding their own creative tools, how we can share the principles that almost like when you see how the genes, they express themselves. The genes, they do not code for life. There's this gene environmental co-regulation, plus there is the world, plus there are chances that makes us who we are, because these phenotypes are changing, they're constantly evolving. So why to stabilize something and believe that this is going to be an ultimate answer to the world?
So Joseph, the question you are asking is how can we actually support people in taking their own lives and their own health and their own well-being into their own hands and not actually being so dependent on any particular system. But then that becomes a field of knowledge in itself. So what would you say would be those practices and principles which would allow people to have that ownership of their own life and body? And actually, just to follow up, because I think for our listeners, especially for those who don't know who the hell these guys are, it's becoming interesting. Okay, so what are they doing really? Because so far we have not mentioned physical practice. So far we have not mentioned body. So how does the body come into it? Is it a metaphor for life on a larger scale, or is it actually within the body, the way we practice? It's also the way we become to think about the world and the way we become to act the world. So in the world. So how significant is the embodied aspect?
So first, the first part that you ask. So some practices or some knowledge that we developed over generations are like a path-dependent learning. Means that if you want to be surgeon, you need to be learning from the surgeon, and you don't go and say experiment on someone and just cut them out and see what's happening. So this is like a path-dependent learning. So a certain vigorous studies need to be done, or in engineering, or otherwise the bridge would fall. So there are certain practices, certain domains where we need to learn very well what was done in past, so we would not repeat the same mistakes. But when it comes to a practice of some sort of cultivation of life, means that you create love for life, you would like to support life, then of course you are being inspired by the previous generations of philosophers, scientists, practitioners of whatever kind. But there is a little bit more of freedom of, not more freedom, there are certain principles that can be shared rather than just the forms, just the stories that you just then need to repeat. So that again is the continuum. So we do not say, you can go alone in your life and just be creative, or you just follow a certain university and you learn how to be a doctor. It needs to be combined. Also, when you know how to find an agency in your life, find a kind of sense of control in your life, and manage the conflicts, manage the challenges that you are meeting in your life. And when you are noticing how you are changing, when you're noticing who you are better or who you are not, then you can contribute to this process of healing. For example, if you would work with a doctor, so you have a certain physio. I'm so happy that physios exist. I'm so happy that Western medicine exists. I'm so happy that we have surgeons. I'm so happy that we have a neuroscientist. This is all superbly important, but in conjunctions with our own capacity to be interested in life. So not be just like a passive consumers of, I have a headache, and so I take the pill. Oh, I'm so happy there is this pill, right? Because sometimes I wake up very early in the morning, I go to airplane, I go down, I teach workshops, I train somehow for some reason that I cannot really trace, I get a headache, and it can become unbearable time to time. So then you get that pill and it really helps you. But if you start to depend only on that pill, then you're in trouble. So sometimes it's good that pill is not always available or not available at all. So we can kind of trace what are the causal relations. Is it my lifestyles? I'm overly stressed. Why am I stressed? What kind of relation do I create to my work that it stresses me? Right? Which environment stresses me? You start to become a little bit more sensitive, and that sensitivity is good. Maybe you make notes. And so then you can share those notes with someone who would help you to support your physiology or your life or your company or whatever, because you are kind of participating in that, what I say, cultivation of life, the cultivation for loving life, loving to solve life challenges. And then you were mentioning about the embodiment.
But can I just pause here a little bit? Just to give a practical example, what we do with Jozef a lot. So let's say we will look into the principles of wrestling, for example, or into the principles of boxing. How do the feet work? How does the distance change? And how do we react? How do we judge the space between me and the opponent? What are the ways for me to avoid? What are the ways to reach out for the opponent? So not getting in the trap of becoming the best boxer in the world, or actually knocking down your opponent or strangling him, but actually getting to know through an embodied experience what has been discovered before, and looking into those deeper principles in order to actually meet life in a very alive way, but not to repeat those old scripts that have been done before. Is this what I understand?
Yeah, you can have a kind of I will overly simplify it, but it's like this. You can rely too much on the past, so you are someone who relies on the existing knowledge. You have a certain library of knowledge, and you are, and then you are revisiting those old scripts, and you are relearning them, and you're making them more and more perfect. This is like kind of traditional forms, so to say, or a very special type of meditation or whatever. But then comes a very unexpected situation, and you are relying only on your past. You don't have creative solutions. You don't train your creativity. Then it could happen that you fade away. It means that you extinct. unless you found something by the chance. The other possibility is that you're always creative. Like there is a new problem. You have another opposite worldview. And that opposite worldview is that, the past is, always outdated. I should always be progressive. I should always be creative. I don't care about what other people created. So it's kind of random. And so when there comes a stressful situation, you try to find quickly solutions, but you cannot find. So you also extinct, unless you find by chance a solution. Or you can also say, okay, there is the past that is kind of coded. And my role is to encode it, understand what was already created, look at it with a new eye, understand how this knowledge can be pushed forward, and also cultivate in the same time creativity, so you can kind of maybe test new hypotheses, test new possible futures, test who else you could become in solving that particular problem or that particular situation. So we would be looking for that kind of balanced view. Okay, there exists something. Let's say there exists a knowledge of certain meditative techniques or stretching techniques, maybe yoga, Tai Chi, maybe Pilates, maybe Feldenkrais, Alexander technique, and plenty of others. Yes, your role in those more fixed systems is to understand what were the principles. The creators, they had certain principles. What were the principles? Can I understand those principles that gave rise to those forms rather than just repeating those forms? That's one pathway. Then you go to wrestling, and in wrestling ask, what are the principles that give rise to so many varieties of forms? Of course, when you look at a wrestler after a wrestler, like when you look at the freestyle wrestlers, if you collect a lot of data, then you understand, they move in a similar way. There are techniques that they repeat themselves because these are two human creatures that are struggling together.
Sort of meta-coordinative patterns.
Yeah, something starts to appear that there are similarities, but no one is really the same. Everyone can create their own poetry. And I was very, very interested in that. So I studied for 20, 25 years a certain traditional forms and traditional medicine, etc. But I said, why those forms are always the same? And I went to the coaches of freestyle wrestling, and I realized, wow, they have the similar language like the old masters, like maybe the masters from the East. But they tested it in a practice. So they also know the softness, also the listening. But the forms are constantly evolving. And I say, I'm very much interested in that world, right? So the form is being created from the context in which... So the form is created in context, it's contextualized. It's not always, I do not always repeat the same words, the same position of my feet, of my arms. I need to respond, and I need to respond flexibly. I need to respond instantly. And I kind of need to remind myself that I should become or maintain myself as no one most of the time, so I can become someone in that particular moment of a throw or a strike. Because when you look at the boxer, he's for most of the time in a ring, he's no one. Tries to remain nowhere, so it would be not easily read by the opponent. So you create a certain strategies, you create a certain footwork, you're testing your partner, but you do not try to create overly stable form, maybe that could be recognized, and you could be then hit by your opponent. But you try to be no one most of the time. Read what are the patterns of your partner, and then create a evolving strategy that could lead you to a victory. So it is very alive process, and I'm very, very inspired
Actually,
by it.
Nice how you frame it. Becoming no one. This is how I could reflect the many years of my own practice, is actually cleaning myself out of the culturally bound forms and somehow finding expressions which would not be repeating something that has been done before as a cultural expression, but almost from my own biology, from my own situation of life where I am now. And this really invites a lot of cleaning back to raw material, like you once said, from sculpture to raw material. And from there is an opportunity to rise for the new forms, which are very much relevant now.
Yeah. So I was using this sentence. So from culturally valued forms back to raw material, so you can sculpt your own. sculpture. Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, with the practice that we do here, and of course, mostly in Vilnius, people will very often ask, so what is it that you do? And we say, well, we are engaging in the embodied practice, movement practice. And that is probably the most confusing answer that one can give, because what is it really that you are doing? What kind of form does it take? It's very hard to comprehend for most of people that we can look at human as an embodied being, or somebody who moves in the most general sense without prescribing any particular culturally defined form. So we are not really dancing, we are not really fighting, we are not really engaging in weightlifting and training. We do all of it, but not for the reasons that people would do it in their own fields. The reason being is, let's say it in a mystical way, becoming nobody, cleaning out the form so that we can become somebody, which is very much relevant to our own lives and to our real situations.
It's not mystical when you say becoming nobody. You know, it's if you're too much somebody all the time, then maybe you try to bend the world a lot towards you, and which is okay time to time. But do you have that opportunity to become no one as well? You know, like I was using this example from Odyssey.
Yes.
When, you know, Odysseus tries to find his back home, and he's trapped in that island with the Cyclops, and the Cyclops, the Polyphemus, he asks him, what is your name? And Odysseus, he says, Kanenan, no one. And he says, oh, what a funny name. And then when he was killing the Cyclops, he says, oh, please help, please help. He was shouting to the Cyclops was shouting to other Cyclops, please help me. And it's, he's killing me. And says, who is killing you? And says, no one. Well, if no one is killing you, then only gods can help you. So this is basically how often you can be in your life no one. How often you can kind of consider yourself being no one. So in order you open up, you're driven again by the world, not only by your predictions. But also within your domain, you see it in a basketball game, you see it in a boxing, you see it in any sport, you see it, how you can become less predictable to your opponents. So you surprise them by the way you do things, so they would not expect your next move. So you could score a basket or give a goal. How the team can respond very quickly, how the team can be having not overly stable strategy and then not be able to respond. So I'm interested in actor of what I used to call actor of many roles. Are you able to play the one and the same role in the theater or in your life? You play some sort of Hamlet for yourself for years, but also can you improvise? Can you become no one again and kind of find out a new role? Can you create your own kind of character that would be necessary for that particular moment? And it is not like when I create a character, I kind of cheat people. Every encounter requires a slightly different engagement, slightly different me. I'm different when I'm talking to my kids. I'm different when I'm talking to you, and I'm different when I'm talking to my kids in the morning, and I'm different when I'm talking to my kids when it is in the evening. And sometimes, you know, it's not like you're changing somehow consciously, but when I go for a meeting with you, I dress well. I'm not in a training clothes, so this is a certain way of taking a certain role. Right? I want to present myself in a certain way, but I can also change my voice. I can also change my facial expression. I can make myself more predictable in this discussion so you feel comfortable, or I can make my appearance and my communication so improbable that I will make you nervous in this dialogue. I will make myself very unpredictable to you, so the discussion will be always, there will be hindrance and you will not know how to answer. So we can play those different roles to enhance the communication and maybe create and kind of inspiring encounters.
You know, when we speak like that, I'm thinking, well, many people will want to change their lives for the better. They envision a different kind of life, but what keeps them stuck where they are is the conditioning, which is basically the past. So I cannot create a different future unless I can let go of what defines me now, what defines my life, what defines me as an individual. So like Nietzsche said, like character is the fate of a man. So what I have formed myself into, the discipline I have cultivated out of myself and within myself, sort of paves the pathway ahead. But actually this ability to go back to raw material, to become nobody, somehow invites a possibility of a different future, because you may create a totally new and true move right now.
Yeah. Look, in order to stay alive, whatever that means, you need some sort of boundary that separates you from the rest of the environment, so you can maintain yourself in a low entropy state. So you can preserve your structure and organization and function. So, but you are separated. But in the same time, that boundary is fuzzy. So it means you are extending yourself to the environment, and you were born out of that environment. So you need to maintain the coupling with the external environment. You need to create a world of significance, world that is meaningful to you. So what if the practice is about communication? Any organisms that makes it well, communicates well, and adjusts that communication in a context-sensitive way. So what if your practice is communication? So we used to say in our FM practice that the main goal is the quest for better communication. Now, if I need to cultivate more my speech, then I will cultivate more my speech. If I need to cultivate more my physical abilities, then I'm going to cultivate my physical abilities. But I'm guided by what is missing. I'm guided by something that breaks. I'm guided by what creates a conflict. And according to those mismatches, these errors between what I believe it's out there and what there actually is creating the content of the practice. So the concept is, can I communicate better? Can I communicate more effectively? Good. What will be the content of the practice? If it's more physical, if I need to lift weight, or if I need to wrestle more, or if I need to dance more, or if I need to write poetry, or if I need to be part of some kind of creative process to develop something new, or if whatever that would be, the content depends on the life situation, something that I need to resolve. So there is this kind of fluctuating, open kind of principle. I do not become overly loyal to stretching. I don't become overly loyal to CrossFit. I don't become overly loyal to Jiu-Jitsu just because it's a great practice. Yes, it is, but maybe it's not for all the time. Maybe it serves that good purpose for a certain amount of time, but maybe by constantly doing that one practice, I create certain deficiencies.
I think the ability that you can not become overly loyal to one discipline is understanding that the discipline is there for your own development and not for its own sake.
Yes, I agree.
But let me now sort of turn back to the question I have previously asked. It's about the embodiment aspect. It seems that what we have spoken until this point sort of gives us a little bit of a ground that, life is an interesting place. It's an interesting phenomenon evolving and not to get locked in something we've done previously, not to get locked in the forms of the past. Respect them, take the best out of them, but be creative in the emerging future that is right here, right now, and have this ability to make this true, original, and maybe authentic move. Within all of that, the question is, what role does the body play? And I think such a question is a strong question in the sense that the body nowadays, and the physical culture that we have established as civilization, takes a place of rather, insignificance. Or I would say it takes a very significant place in terms of health, in terms of maybe art performance, or in terms of sports. But very rarely does it come into picture as a sort of field that actually creates the life that we live in many, many respects. And the formulation that comes to my mind is this embodied cognition idea that, whatever we think, perceive about the world, it's not only happening in our mind alone, which is somewhat separated from the body, like Descartes has sort of formulated for us a couple of 100 years ago, but actually the whole body is a brain, or the body is embrained, or brain is embodied. So basically, however we move in the world creates a basis for our understanding of the world, for our thinking and acting in the world. So what thoughts come to your mind?
Or it's so broad, but yes, the mind is embodied, embedded, situated, extended, evolutionary, emotional. So this is all nicely interconnected. I mean, brain didn't evolve alone, right? So it evolved in our evolving phenotype, in our evolving bodies. It evolved in that world that we occupied, in not only the way we were responding to the environment, so we are not just adapting, but we are also selecting what we will attend to. And we are not only solving problems now, we are also preparing resources and tools for the future. But also, furthermore, we are also using our cells, our bodies and our minds to also attend to world in a kind of aesthetical way, creative way. I create things for nothing. So there is all this range of possibilities. And of course, we are bound to this particular structure that has certain sensors, has certain capacities to respond to the world. We have a certain affordances. So what would be interesting, and what I like to look at, when I look at my body, I understand the long evolutionary informational coupling. My body looks like this. My fingers are looking. I have this particular shape. I have this particular spine in my hips and my knees, and I create this particular really diverse synergies because I attended to an interesting complex world, or I was solving an interesting troubles along the development. And I assume certain position in the world. And so I know that my perception will be always limited to
how you moved in those situations.
Yes, so I have a certain type of body. So a spider or a lion or a cockroach perceives the world in a different way. So I have a certain limitation. That's why I will never really understand what universe is. I will have always a certain particular perspective. Plus, I have also my own hypothesis, my generative model about what the world is. So that even more kind of not locks it, but creates a very first person kind of perspective in the world. But knowing or studying those limitations and which limitations they need to be respected and which can be overcome is very, very interesting to me. But in our practice, you know that we have zero forms. And in zero forms, I'm asking myself, what's that history? What is the history of this body, and how I can be using it in the, not in its full potential, but in this creative potential that it has. Do I have to always attend to the world in the same way? Do I have to always create the same perspective? How do I face the world? How I can be multifacial, so I can kind of walk around this microphone and study it from many different angles. But for this, I need a body. I need action. So perception.
And also some skill.
Yes, of course, sensory motor expertise.
What's under the table, you have to be able to get there somehow.
Exactly. So our perception depends on the action. So we select certain actions, right? So our sensory motor expertise, our sensory motor capabilities are then revealing the world in a particular way. So how can I move about that microphone? But I also, am I interested? Maybe I'm just interested by this angle of looking at this, but maybe I'm just curious creature. I do not have to, but I want to experience the world from a different angle. I have this notion like how that object looked from the other side, and then maybe that object had a certain purpose, but can I repurpose this object for something else? So this is that kind of amazing creative capacities that we had throughout the evolutionary development. But now I feel like we are more like, I know where the supermarket is. I know what kind of protocol I need to follow. I know which supplements I need to take. I know that master told me that, this form tells me this. And so I feel like we are more like a consumers. And there's this one aspect that we forget about our bodies. Usually we forget that, the body schema just falls somewhere on the background, and it should fall there on the background. We do not attend to ourselves until something starts to go wrong. We feel pain in our belly, or we feel pain in our knees, or we have a headache, or something goes wrong in our physiology. So we do not attend at all. We do not sample our internal states often enough to understand what's the cost of our communication on our physiology. We don't do that. until the problem comes, which is usually then too late. So I'm interested in, can you pay a little bit of attention to your physiology before there's a trouble, seeing like what's the cost of living, what kind of solutions do you finding, how you're tolling yourself, how do you feel about your life, not only today, but what is your tendency of your feelings in your life. And then I'm also interested, okay, this is checking your physiological states, how well you are kind of maintaining your self in this very narrow viable range. But also I'm pushing myself to the boundaries of what I can do. So I create some sort of situations, maybe in a climbing, maybe in a fighting, maybe in a creative process, how I can push myself to the edge to extend my capabilities of how I could potentially taste the world, how I could eat, how I could digest the world in a novel way, how I could be innovative. So I create for me a safe world where I can test the new strategies. And I always navigate between these two worlds. I do not change my idea about the world. I sense myself to understand what's the effect of my communication on myself. I understand that. Maybe I'm improving it. I'm improving the actions under my hypothesis. Or I am testing a possible futures. I'm creating some sort of theater in which I test the new strategies, I test how I could better perform in certain situations, or I just play to create a new world. And I realize, wow, I could be still someone else, which is so liberating. There are so many options. The world is full of opportunities. We just fail to see them because we are so much locked in that local optima that we find. Oh, I feel okay. I think I'm doing well. So, and that's it.
It's great to listen to you because it's inspiring to think, well, there's so much more and I can engage in life in so many more ways, and I can also reveal so much more about myself through the way I actually move. I actually solve everyday kind of physical tasks. And yet, so this is an inspiring and a beautiful part. Somebody might say, oh, I would like a little bit of that in my life as well. But then on the other hand, if I think about, as a civilization in general, it seems we are becoming more and more primitive in the way we move, in the way we solve physical challenges, in our choices for health, in our choices for fitness. So to say, we are becoming more and more linear, more and more protocol led, looking very much short-term gains. And then that makes me also wonder if that is not if it is not the deep reason for us also running into many of the social, ecological, and spiritual divides that we're experiencing in our civilization, not being attend to our own potential of being creative and discovering life from always the new angle and the new opportunity, somewhat leads us to, let me say that, fundamentalism. So if we move in a linear way, if we solve the tasks in the most optimized, efficient, effective manner, we sort of tend to become the beings who know, the beings who are fixed within their movement and thinking routines, which does not allow us to see the complexity of the living systems of the world, the complexity of ideas and perspectives of other people and other nations and so on, which eventually leads us to where we are now today in our world. So let us touch a little bit upon this relation that we might be seeing or not. In the way we address ourselves, it might be the way we address the world at large.
Of course. One of the participants in a mentorship, John from England, he asked an interesting question. So I usually state at the beginning of our learning process, I said, I am interested how to love life. Then I say, okay, I'm also interested how to solve life challenges. And then I say, I combine these two sentences and I say, I'm interested how to love to solve life challenges, right? And then he asked me something like, but what does it mean that love? Because this is problematic, he said. And it's a very beautiful question. It's so deep. I could not even, I didn't, for me, it's love. I don't have it very well defined for myself. But there is this, I love life means willing to support life. And I said that in a million podcasts and everywhere when I'm teaching, I'm saying it. When my father heard that bees are dying, he basically stood up and learned how to support bees. So we have a beehive, and he takes care of them. And this is not like he helped them once, but he decided to help them, and so he needs to be around them for years now. And suddenly I realized there is something beautiful about the bee stories, right? There is a social homeostasis. So how the beehive regulate the homeostasis of the beehive, how they collectively act, and what we could learn from their quality of support, how they sense themselves as a community. And that's very beautiful. And of course, we do not have time for that. But this social homeostasis is very, very important. We forget about that. We only talk about ourselves. And we create this boundary through which we can maintain ourselves. We make it too thick. But we need to understand that boundary is fuzzy, that we are extended, that our boundary extends to the world, all the world we have touched in our life. It's part of our boundary. And so we greatly depend on the environment which we are part of. We greatly depend on the world we are creating.
I think that becomes very obvious in practice when you're wrestling with somebody and they realize that without your partner, you are really nothing. And it's not somebody you have to beat up, but actually participate in co-evolving game together.
Of course. I mean, if I want to be cognitively intact, if I want to invest in my cognitive buffer, if I want to have a cognitive reserve, if I want to maintain my cognitive functions in an old age, I will not engage in anything else but in open games. That's the best thing that we can be doing for ourselves. Exercising, lifting weights, or being alone. That's valuable. Of course it's valuable. Always when I'm reading a complicated paper in the computer, I can read maximum 45 minutes, and then I go on the side, and then I do some pull-ups, or I snatch kettlebells, or whatever I do. So I like that individual exercises as well, but it needs to be rightly combined. I like to be engaged in games in which we are changing the rules, where I need to constantly adapt, where I can move my body, but also communicate and process information and process novel situations to which I need to be responsive, to which I need to be open. Otherwise, I would not make it through. And this is so inspiring. This is the best we can do for ourselves.
I think within that, we realize how embedded, extended, and enacted and embodied our lives are, is within those practices.
No, but and then saying that who I am, what do I know? I don't know anything on my own. I know everything because of other people and because of the landscapes I've been in. So what I am, the authenticity that I have, is because of everyone else. I need to credit everyone I met. And so I'm greatly dependent on everything. And that gratefulness or that humbleness that you depend on the others then brings that kind of the social homeostasis that I have a certain responsibility, but you know what we are doing. When you have a pain and someone removes that pain from you very quickly and you do not leave the consequences of that pain, you are less likely to change. We talk about, how we are polluting the world. Well, keep your garbage that you produce in your balcony or in your yard or back in your house for the year. You will understand how much you produce. If you're going to see it, you're going to be bothered. But we do something magical. We create garbage. We put it somewhere in some boxes on the street, and some cars are taking it somewhere where we do not see it. Well, maybe you should see how much garbage you produce. Maybe then something would change. You go to toilet, you do your poo, then you push a button and it disappears somewhere. So it's like, and your marble white toilet is always clean. And so you're not kind of, old people, we put them somewhere in a hospice. We don't want them around because they smell.
We don't want to talk about dying.
Yes. So we are living in some kind of privileged, clean world. But our luxury that we have here in the West is because of the expense of other people. And I don't think everyone truly understand. We have that our cleanness because it dump our garbage somewhere else. So we just want to maintain our luxury and our comfort. That's what we want. We do not want a social homeostasis. We do not understand, or maybe we understand intellectually that Earth is like a one organism. No, we just want to be comfortable, and we want to have whatever we want at that particular moment. You cannot go on without food. Like you want those meals that you have, but maybe you need just a good meal a day. Maybe you can do less in the world. Maybe your teaching should lead to calm other people's mind and hearts rather than trigger them that they feel they miss something and they need to do more and achieve more and own more. We are so busy having that we forgot about being, and we already said that before. So we are hungry ghosts. We always want more. We are not happy with less. So we always surround ourselves with other things and other things and other things. It just reminds me when Linda, my partner, she bought me some really beautiful shoes some 20 years ago. And the shoemaker, he can still repair them. And I'm so proud that I have over 20 years old shoes that they work and they are very comfortable. And I would be looking for that kind of craft. Buy maybe one's more expensive shoe, or someone who made it a great shoe for your foot, and then keep it for a long period of time and take care about it. Care about other people because they will be around, and it's like what is your obligation in life? I hope it is being helpful to other people, that you can create a support. What else is there to do? I don't know. I don't find much of meaning in anything else anymore. So if I teach, I teach this whatever FM, but it is really, hopefully, I have this strong desire. Could I help somehow with my very, very limited knowledge? Could I help people to communicate better, and with themselves and with the others, finding more their authentic self? If I manage a little bit, my life is, I would be feeling very satisfied. I don't have any other desire anymore. Yeah.
Jozef, we have spoken a lot of things, and I wonder if there's anything else that you would like to touch upon in our conversation. What I was going to ask you about is where has FM practice been evolving? What currently captures your mind, your attention, and your most interest? Maybe that would be very interesting to hear, well, for myself and of course for our listeners.
Yeah, so I am recently very inspired and obsessively attached to the new development in neuroscience, and evolutionary theories. I am so much inspired by that, especially of all the people that are related to the development of active inference. So Carl Friston, Andy Clark, Pezzulo, Maxwell, all these great people, Seth. These people are I never met them, but I'm really inspired by their work and how they try to understand how we are making sense of the world. It's extremely, extremely valuable. And on the other hand, so there's this kind of scientific part of it. And then on the other hand, I am interested in poetry of body motion. So I'm so inspired by freestyle wrestling, these open forms like encounters. I don't want to become a wrestler. I'm already old. People say, "Oh, you are old only when you think you are old." But I know, my body, what's going on. I trained my entire life, but I'm interested in these open games and these creative games and how we can use different games like basketball, hockey, football, and take those principles and adjust those forms in order to work on creativity. And the third element that is capturing me and was capturing me for most of my life is the art. So now when I teach, I try to teach Western science, this vigorous science, data collection, in conjunctions with fine arts, performing arts, music. So there's this poetry of the body and our capacity to be exact, but at the same time to be dreamy and combine those words together. I've wrote maybe, it's funny, I've wrote like maybe 700 pages on the notes and things that I would like to publish. But there is this conflict. I finished my doctorate in voice and communication, and so there is this academic field that I would like. I like because there is good stuff happening there. But also I like that openness of art. And it seems I still have a lot of troubles to combine those worlds together. How I can be exact but also poetic. And Daniel Dennett, he said once something interesting. Well, if it's in more poetic language, it could be this or that, but I didn't define it. So he was kind of criticizing it a little bit. But I said how I could find a poetic language and express those beautiful things about what living creatures need to do in order to stay alive and maybe not only maintain themselves in that state, but also thrive. So how we could combine those languages, how we could merge it. And I'm interested in not only merging East and West, but also North and South, and also you being in the center of that landscape, like who are you and who we are and where we are heading to. So this is very, very inspiring to me. And as you know, I try to work less and try to play more. So I spend half of a year or maybe more doing nothing. I try to do nothing. I try to think. I try to play. I try to sit in a coffee place and just look into nowhere, stare into nowhere, and try to find solutions to the problems that the people that I meet in my life, they have, and if I could come up with better solutions. So this is my creative path that I would like to kind of continue and see what kind of result, if there will be anything that would be helpful to anyone around me, knowing that I am greatly limited in my computational powers, in my cognitive capacities. I'm limited in my bodily capacities, but hopefully I will be able to contribute a little bit to the development to the human development hopefully for better than worse. So how we can be more authentic to ourselves and stay creative and playful, because playfulness seems to be a hallmark for a good quality of life. So we are not overly serious all the time. So we have time to play with our kids. So we can create this kind of space within which we can cultivate a garden, not knowing exactly what kind of flowers and trees will be growing there. So we can stay being surprised.
Let us stay gardeners.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jozef, very much for this real and live conversation, and for the work you do and for your contribution to communities all around the world.
Super. Thank you so much.